Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books in Hindsight. I am author Matthew Hines. Today, we have Fred Stuvek. He is an ex-Navy man, Naval Academy quarterback, and he's going to be talking to us about his book, It Starts With You. It's going to be a great podcast. Before we get started, I want to just encourage you to maybe consider sponsoring us at Patreon/Hindsight, or just go to Heinessight.com and pick up one of my books, or pick up Fred's book, which is going to be featured at the bottom of the first page. All right, well, with that, let's go to the phones.
Welcome to Books in Hindsight, the only podcast where hindsight is always 2020. And we explore the great books, works, and ideas of the century. Now, here's your host, teacher, and author, Matthew Hines.
Okay, his name is Fred Stuvek. He is an author, and he is also a coach and a consultant. I just want to read you a little sentence from his website, and this is a very interesting statement that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to read this we're going to read this now, and we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of it throughout the rest of the podcast. And at the end, we're going to see if we really understand what this statement means. All right, so here it is. Stuvek has observed and codified the only brain training that creates quantum leaps of action. All right, so that is a big statement. That's a huge statement, Fred. And, you know, there's guys that write these motivational books and these self-help books. And then there are guys that, basically what I'm trying to say, there are guys that talk the talk. But Fred Stuvek, you're a guy that walks the walk. I wanted you to describe your background a little bit. But, let the audience know just where you're coming from and what makes you an expert to write a book like this.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word expert, but let me talk about my background, okay? I come from a small coal mining town in southwestern Pennsylvania. We had 4 seasons there. We had football, basketball, baseball, and track, so I was quite active athletically. I was fortunate to have a number of offers to go play football in college, and I decided to go to the Naval Academy.
Well, Fred, can I stop you right there? I think you're trying to be a little bit modest on this. You were also inducted into the Hall of Fame for how many of those sports?
4 of them.
4 of them. Okay. I just want to make sure that people that are listening to this understand just what kind of person we're talking to here. All right. So you got accepted to the Naval Academy.
And I went to the Naval Academy, and I not only attended it, but I graduated, and I led it for 3 years at quarterback at the Naval Academy. And then whenever I was my graduate, I was commissioned. I spent 5 years in the service and transitioned to the civilian world. In the civilian world, I started out in the public sector with a large company, moved there to a small high-tech startup that went well. We were pioneering some new technology. We ended up doing an IPO. We actually had an IPO scheduled the month after 9/11, which was quite an issue there for a while. So anyhow, we regrouped and were able to pull it off the next June. After the IPO, I left and don't handle the retirement thing too well. So I started up a company, a medical services company. And I sold that about a year and a half ago. It was half a dozen imaging centers in the Southeast. And after that, I was trying to sort out what to do, and I'd given a few talks. I gave a talk, for example, to the Marine ROTC unit at the University of Tennessee. And after every talk I would give, somebody would come up to me and say, well, can I buy your book? And I said, well, I haven't written a book. And I've had those questions. I've spent a lot of time. I've enjoyed mentoring people, particularly young people. And I've been encouraged to write a book. And my wife has also been an ardent advocate for me to write a book. I always try to listen to my wife, so I decided to write a book. And the name of the book is called It Starts With You.
All right, so I think we're pinning down one of my questions, Fred. So I wanted to know at what point, I mean, you, even as a young man, you'd already done like things that, most people wouldn't even consider doing in their lives. And I just wanted to know, at what point did you say, I can really offer some value to people. I can help people out. I can contribute back and teach them some of the skills that I have. When did that came about, when you spoke to these students?
Well, I've always tried to give or help people because, one of the things, and, you being ex-military, you probably understand this too as well, don't you, Michael? Right?
Yeah, it's Matt, and it's a big thing. People that serve in the military. Oh, don't worry about that, Fred. I think I said my mom couldn't get my name right, so that's okay. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm glad my mom didn't.
An email.
Yeah, my mom actually. I'm glad she named me Matt, and you know why? That's what everybody at school called me. So
okay, that's very good.
It worked out well for me. But yeah, going back to that military thing, when you survive, I don't know what your experience was, but you survive that, and then when you get out, especially like I was in the 82nd Airborne, and I spent most of my time in the woods waiting to go shoot at people or probably die. And when you escape that, when you get away from that, you really look at your life and go, boy, I survived it. So how can I give back? So yeah, I think everybody that serves, or most people that serve in the military, kind of get that when they've had the chance to come out back into civilian life. So that's great, Fred. And I want to thank you for your. What's that?
If I could expand on that, if you don't mind. Okay, I was getting to a point. I knew you would empathize with me, but being in the military and going to the Naval Academy, one of the things that always struck me is it's not about me. Okay, it was about a greater purpose. It's about service. It's about service to your country. It's about service to your team members. Okay, and it's about a team working together. And the whole ethos of working. In the military is working together as a team for a common purpose. And I think that those are values that stay with you for as long as you live. And I've carried them with me all along. And, there's a saying in the military, you never leave anyone on the battlefield. Well, anytime I see someone struggling, particularly a young person, I try to do what I can to help them to find the way. And just over the years, I've just had a lot of people come to me and ask questions, and I've always been very open and willing to give answers.
Well, that's great. And that's really respectable that you do that, because you obviously have a lot to offer people. So I want to just ask you some questions, Fred. Can you talk about you were in the Navy? Can you talk about the rank you held, maybe some of your specific duties?
I was commissioned as an ensign. And my last commission was as a lieutenant. I had a number of responsibilities. One of them, I was a surface warfare officer, which is an officer of a deck on a warship. I had a division. My specialties were communications and intelligence. I deployed to the Mediterranean several times. We did several other North Atlantic cruises, some NATO exercises, things like that. But one of the things that was very interesting to me was that you're all working. For example, you have a division of 100 men. Okay, there's a difference between positional authority and personal authority. You know, it's one thing just to give an order for the sake of giving an order, but if you can explain it in such a manner so that the people understand it and buy into it, it works out better. So, I mean, I've always avoided in civilian life giving a direct order. I always try to lead people in the right direction so that we're moving together in lockstep. And I also learned that there are different leadership styles that apply to different situations. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and there's also not a one-size-fits-all for every individual. If you have 100 people in a division, 100 men in a division, today it's 100 men and women. We've made progress there. Everybody's different, and so you just can't treat everybody the same. Now, you have common processes, you have a common approach, but in terms of managing the personality and working with that individual, they all have their own little nuances and ways and things of behaving and acting. So you have to empathize to that, which is I bring up the point of emotional quotient in my book. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I want to go back and talk about what you just talked about, and please, I hope I don't forget to come back and apply this to your book. But my experience in the military, like I was in the 82nd, and that's a big, what they call a dog and pony show. You've got, you know, it's supposed to be the elite division, and you've always got people watching you, and your boots always got to be shined, and you got to be the strongest, the toughest, and, you know, all of this, you know, basically image thing. And we would get these officers that came in, and, you know, they're ROTC guys or 90-day wonders. And they just were going around trying to, and basically, here's what I'm trying to get at. We'd get guys out of West Point, and they'd say, I don't have anybody to impress. I graduated from West Point. So we called it cutting through the bullshit. And that's what really impressed me about guys out of the academies. And you really sound like one of those guys. So let's talk about how this applies to your book and getting people to actually get into action. And let's just use this to start talking about what exactly is your book about?
Yeah, my book is I believe that anybody at any point in their career has the chance to improve themselves, to maximize their potential, to become more successful and fulfilled. But to do that, they have to make the necessary steps. My book is how to instruct someone to develop the mindset and habits for success. You've heard the term, we're all creatures of habit. Well, how we think and how we act and the habits we form, okay, define who we are as a person. And so what's important, what you need to do, and how you do it is the basic premise of the book. And I might add that not only is it comprehensive, but it's very specific because it tells you exactly what you need to do for certain attributes or skill sets. For example, how do you develop self-discipline? How do I develop confidence? Things like that. So when you've read a book about, you know, I've read a lot of self-help books, and there's some good self-help books out there. Matt, I'm glad I didn't say Michael again.
That's okay.
Okay. But, I mean, you know, everybody says you have to believe in yourself, okay? Have you ever seen a book that has told you specifically what you need to do to believe in yourself? I mean, have you?
Nope.
Okay. Have you ever seen a book that says, okay, this is what you have to do from A to Z to be successful? And I've not seen one like that. And you know, one of the things that's important is I read a book years ago. It was written by a gentleman named Ron Zemke, I believe, In Search of Excellence or something like that. But he said that excellence was a number of things done consistently well across a broad spectrum. Well, I would say that success is the same thing. Success is the same, is doing a number of things consistently well across the entire spectrum. And that encompasses a number of areas: the ability to communicate, the ability to lead, the ability to withstand adversity, understand failure, to know that it's a learning experience, and so forth. So, I mean, that is pretty much the essence of the book.
Okay, so Fred, tell me one time in your life that you had adversity, you had challenges, and you applied your principles.
There were actually several times, but the most recent was with my last company. You've heard of what's called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, once a year we'd get together with my management team and would put together a strategic plan, and we would list out, okay, what are the threats? We would list the top 10 threats. And then I would say, okay, let's just have one page of paper put together. What will we do if these happen? They may never happen, but Matt, as you know, sometimes things do not work out, okay? You know, as it turned out, 7 out of the 10 went south on us. I mean, the government came in and, 60% of our patients were Medicare. We ended up with over a 60% reduction in reimbursement just in one fell swoop. We had regulations put on us that made us have to increase our staffing for certain procedures. There were just a number of things that all kind of converged at the same time. Now, I didn't sit there and think I was a victim or think that someone was just bent on, rotting devastation on Fred Stuvek and his company or whatever. So, I mean, we brushed off our contingency plans and, we went through. It was a great learning experience. And as you know, Matt, life is a series of W's and L's. It's a series of wins and losses. So you celebrate the wins and you learn from the losses.
Right. So you just said, okay, this is not working out, and you faced facts and moved on. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think when something like that happens is, anytime something like that happens, you have to, first of all, you have to be aware as to what's going on, and you have to accept it. Yeah. You also have to seek the truth. When I say seek the truth, you have to get the facts. Because what you think is happening may not be happening. And sometimes when people are upset or stressed, their emotions tend to take hold. And there are statements made or things made that maybe aren't true. And they're not being mendacious. They're not being, trying to mislead you or anything like that. It's just that, their emotions take control. So you have to get to the root cause of the problem. You have to address the illness, not the symptoms. And the other thing that you need to do too as a leader is you have to maintain your composure. You have to set the standard. You have to imbue confidence. You have to show that there's a plan that can be turned around. And you also have to remember that you got there by doing a certain thing, okay? That is not the time to take shortcuts or to compromise your values. And it's that firm belief and strong, steadfast belief in what you are, what you can do, and what you're about that's going to get you through that. And the last thing that you have to look out for, at least in my opinion, is that during times of adversity and crisis, there are certain people that just aren't made up for it, that don't do well with that. And that doesn't mean they're good people. That just means they can't function in that type of environment. So always be cognizant of team health when it comes to something like that. Because when the company turns back around and you get back on your feet, they're going to continue to be valuable contributors. Okay?
So, okay, I'm just going to try to reiterate what you've said because it's great. The first thing, I guess I'm going to call it the Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them and when to walk away and run. I think that's the first thing you're trying to say. And then the second one is, as Clint Eastwood says quite eloquently, man's got to know his limitations. So, yeah, those are right. So let's just ask you then, is you do consulting. So when you consult, you don't have a broad thing that you try to lay on people. You're actually trying to get people to look at their own individual self. Is that correct?
I do not have a template. I do not go in with any preconceived notions about anything. When I go in, I like to talk to people. I like to talk to everybody and get their feel as to what's going on. You know, when someone goes in and says we want to increase sales, it's not just increasing sales. Okay, do you have the right people in place? Do you have a good plan? Have you communicated the plan? Do the people understand the plan? For example, the larger the company, okay, the greater the need for succinctness and clarity, because with each degree of separation, there's a degree of uncertainty. And the other thing is you know, is there a dashboard? A dashboard is something that at any particular point in time, someone up in management can get a snapshot as to what's going on. Are people looking at what's going on, and are they paying attention to the processes, or are they spending more time in strategic planning? And I think another thing and then two other things which come to mind, and I'm rambling here if you'll excuse me, but you know, another thing comes to mind is that you know, you have to look at, you know, you have to take input from people. You have to listen to people. And, you know, one of the things that happens in larger companies, particularly with senior management, sometimes, not all of them, but some of them, is they tend not to listen to people all the time. And, you know, it's the people down in the trenches that are having experienced this stuff. So you have to listen to them. And you can't be arrogant and think that you have all the solutions or all the answers. You have to listen, take it in, try to find a consensus, and move forward.
Okay, so then that just keeps leading to more questions. So you could be basically a consultant for a large company or an individual. Is that correct?
Any of the above.
Okay, and how would somebody? Why would somebody come to you? What would their needs have to be, or what would the situation be where you could be the most valuable for them?
Well, let's say that they think they're in a rut, or their business is lagging. They think they have morale problems. Let's say they're in dire straits and they need to have help turning things around. You know, one of the things that's valuable is sometimes you're so close to the fire that the flames you get, so you don't see what's going on. So sometimes it's good for an individual with an outside perspective, without a bias, to come in. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that I do is I not only recommend that I insist that all discussions be confidential, because, you know, when I leave, I don't want messengers getting shot. Okay. You know, that does happen from time to time. I'm talking euphemistically, not literally, so to speak, Matt. Yeah. But and you know, and I've done this just one-on-one with a few people, but I find it quite rewarding and quite fulfilling. But it has to be where there's a good fit too. You know, I won't do it just to do it. It has to be where I believe that this is a good cause, and I think I can make a difference. I'm not a mercenary.
Yeah, so are you going to, well, I'm not sure about that. I think we're all a little bit mercenary. So you go into a company, your quality assurance, or you are motivation?
More assessment, management, marketing, and turnaround.
Not so you can be hired by a company and they're not doing so well, and you can turn them around?
Well, you know, there are no guarantees to anything, man.
Of course.
Yeah, but I can certainly do my best.
Okay. And what particular things, like, let's go back. I want to try to, you know, focus on the book, but you can't, a book, it can't be tailor-made to certain things. So would you say read my book and then consult and see if that works, and then consult me, or how does the book fit into this?
Well, I think the book fits in for any individual, you know, and it could be, you know, someone is looking to improve themselves. I think it'd be good for new employees. I think it would be good for someone who's just starting out on a career, or someone who's in the midst of a career change. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily apply to just for a company that's in trouble. Hopefully, by reading the book and looking at it and taking heed of what's being stated, they can avoid getting themselves in these situations. However, these things do happen, which is why the third part of my book covers I'm trying to do this by memory, believe it or not, but I spent so much time writing it. In the third part, the first chapter is on adversity. The second chapter is on failure. Okay. The third chapter is on recovery. How do you recover? Then the fourth chapter is on the team, because at the end of the day, most problems are rooted in human dynamics, miscommunication. Business is simple. People are complex, and therein lies probably 80% of the problems. And then the last thing, the last chapter in part 3 is the fundamentals, because usually when things aren't working out, it's due to a breakdown in someone not performing the fundamentals. And that's why if you look at the great teachers, the great coaches, such as Bill Belichick, Phil Jackson with the Bulls, they were keen on mastering the basics, because it's a small thing that you do every day, day in and day out, to make such a big difference.
Yeah. And I just there's a couple of things I want to throw in here, Fred. The first one is, if you came to the podcast late, I just want to say that we have this airing on YouTube. This is on Google Play, iTunes, and you can watch this on Books in Heinessight. And Fred Stuvek's book is called It Starts With You. And it is available on Amazon, Fred?
It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble, iTunes,
Nook.
a number of
okay. And also, you can get it off of my website. I will have the Amazon links, the affiliate links, on Heinessight.com. And so we're talking to Fred Stuvek, the author of It Starts With You, and his website, which I have not talked about yet, is itstartswithyou.net, and I really encourage you to go and check that out. Fred is an amazing individual, and you could have people that as I've said in the beginning, that walk the walk, or the talk the talk. But Fred's been there and he's done all this stuff. So when he goes in and tells you your company needs this, it's not that you're talking to somebody that's just coming in off the street. Fred has served as an officer in the United States Navy. He's gone through the intense midshipman program, or was a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy. And he's a sports hero in West Virginia, a Hall of Famer. So this is somebody who really knows what they're talking about, and it's not somebody that's going to come to your company and give you a bunch of cliches and whatever. This is somebody who knows how to actually look at your situation and tell you what you need to get done to get it going. I hope I'm correct in saying that, Fred.
You are. You're very flattering, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you, man.
Well, I know what you've been through. So, in the military and as an officer, that's not an easy life. And I have to tell you, I don't know how you guys live on those ships. I do the tour. I'm up in Seattle, so every year the fleet comes in the summer, and I go and I look at those. My wife and I go down to the ships, and I just go, boy, I'd rather live in the dirt than live on one of those ships, because at least I can stretch out and get some privacy. All right, so can you talk about you were very good at sports, and how much is sports reflected in your coaching? And don't say there's no I in team, because we all know that.
Well, if you look at sports, I mean, one of the things that you have to do is you have to drill, you have to practice, you have to master the fundamentals, you have to have a good plan, it has to be communicated properly, and you have to have the team working in unison, and then as circumstances dictate, you have to adapt, make changes, and move on. And to me, that's kind of also a description of business.
Okay, so let's talk. You talked about some of the problems in business today. It sounds to me like a breakdown in communications. I think there's also a breakdown in goals. if you're a lot of problems I think that occur in businesses is just has to do with motivation. So, and basically, I'm a human being. I'm motivated by money. What other kinds of motivation can a business apply to its employees to get them working towards the common goal?
Well, I read a survey not so long ago that said over half of the workers in the United States are not happy in their current job. I think one of the issues, Matt, is that there are just a lot of people aren't particularly enthralled with their job, and I think it does affect the performance. So I think it's important to have the right people in the right positions, as part of the team. And I think the other thing is, there are extrinsic values and intrinsic values. The extrinsic values are, the money, the position, the title, and all that. And the intrinsic values are, do I find this work rewarding, satisfying, fulfilling, and all that. Each person has their own set, some way, others, the extrinsic more, the intrinsic more, whatever. But you need to have a good balance too, as well. And on the corporate side, I think one of the things that you run into is, particularly with public companies, is sometimes I think they not only do, but they absolutely do take shortcuts or have to make changes to satisfy shareholders, and look at the quarterly reports, which may jeopardize some of their long-term performance. So I think those factors come in, but that's a delicate balance too. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying that you need to have a good balance when it comes to that.
Well, that sounds like a real fancy way of saying just paying the employees less, and the less you pay people, the less quality you're going to get. And I think that at the corporate level, you're going to be looking that for employees that emphasize more on intrinsic value for the job rather than the I guess it was extrinsic, you said?
Yeah.
So they don't want to pay them that much. They want somebody who's happy just to be there doing the job.
No, you want to have the person in the job that is incentivized properly. And not everybody responds to the same incentive program. There are some people that are more motivated by the money and the title. Okay? If that's the case, that's where you motivate them and push them. There are some people that value their vacation time more, okay, and the chance to work at home, or the fact that you might have a daycare center at the place where you work, so their children are taken care of. So, everybody has different types of, needs today. And I think with we have a lot of single family parents today. We have, some of those considerations. So it just does create some complexities for the workforce that a good company is going to have to take a look at and make adjustments for their employees.
Well, that's really refreshing to hear. So you would actually encourage companies to talk to their employees and say, what can we do to serve you better? Is that what you're saying?
Well, in my last company, we actually would talk to each employee, and we would consult them, so to speak, and ask them, okay, for this next year, what would you value more, okay, in terms of incentives? Would you like to see it structured more on money, more on time, more on, whatever? And, it was interesting. Some years it was the money. Some years it was more time off. Some years it was flexible hours. So, we tried to listen. We tried to listen to our employees. Now, we had a smaller company. It was only about 50 people. So that makes it easier. Now, is it more difficult in a larger company? Yeah, yes and no. All you need to do is get more people like myself talking to groups of 50, and then after a while, you get it done.
Yeah. Maybe you can come up and consult at Boeing. I know they could use you up here. So, well, that is awesome. So, I've asked you about challenges. What do you? I want to get into the mechanics of your publishing, but this is basically I want to just show people that you are not somebody that is just trying to sell a book. You're actually somebody that can offer a lot of value. And can you just tell us Tell us about maybe another challenge that you faced. Talk about a challenge with writing. You were going to write a book. That's a kind of a crazy idea. What were the challenges with that?
Well, the first thing was I've had some, articles published, but I never wrote a book. And the first thing you have to understand is there's a lot of wisdom to the adage, you don't know what you don't know. And the publishing business has a lot of processes and nuances involved with it that are not only the average person is not familiar with, doesn't even know about it. So, most people have little to no experience in publishing. I fell under the second category. I had no experience in publishing. Okay, so I'm trying to decide what to do. So the first thing I did was, rather than going on and saying, how should you write a book? I went the other way and I said, what mistakes do people make when they write books? Okay, because I wanted to learn from other people's mistakes, hence the thing I talked about, adversity and failure and the lessons learned there. And, as I got my hands around it, it was the writing process. I mean, how to do the writing process. What is that process like, and how do you establish goals? Because as I say in my book, goals are very important, and I put together a goal of so many words per week. Now, would I meet those goals each week? No, but then the next week I would make them up. Then I would routinely adjust them. I review the goals over time just to see how I was doing with it. And then I then I put together an outline. Okay, I had an idea about the book. I wanted it in 3 parts, so I put an outline, not a folder for each chapter. Okay, and then I would put together an outline, jot the ideas down, and then write. Now, it was, Matt, it was an arduous process. Sometimes you sit down, you've heard the term writer's block, you're sitting there and you don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes you get into a rhythm, a flow, and things work out. But you just have to keep at it. And after 6 months, I had a rough manuscript put together. One of the things that I did during this whole process was I had some advisors, just trusted advisors. I had a finance guy, an engineering guy, a lawyer, and a sales guy. And every time I would write a chapter, I would send it to each one of them and say, what do you think about it? Just to get their perspective. I wrote every word, but I tried to get other people's, input. At the end of the 6-month process, I looked at it and I said, Fred, this is just a bunch of words. If someone's looking for answers, the instructions aren't here. So the next 3 months, I kept most of the basic information in there, but I put it in an instruction manual form because, Matt, it's my contention that today a lot of people are looking for answers. And so what I was trying to do was put together a book that provides answers in a very not only comprehensive but specific way so that they can look at it, build each one on each other, and then even go back and use it as a reference manual later on. Okay, once I got to the point, in unison with that, I wanted to put the best product out in the best manner possible. Okay, I wanted a mistake-free manuscript that looked great. Now, what does that entail? What does a good book entail? A good book entails, this is from reading several months ago, but I think it was, if memory serves, it was you have to have a great cover, okay? You have to have a good title, a good tagline. You need to have good content, okay? And it needs to be put together in a professional manner with a good layout. So, when people say self-publishing is easy, and you go on the internet and they say you can easily self-publish, I think that is a myth. Okay, if you know anything about publishing, you are not going to do well, and you're going to come out with a subpar product. So I looked around. I was fortunate to have engaged the services of a company called 1106 Design in Phoenix, Michelle DeFilippo and Rhonda Rollins, class acts, good people, and Kimberly Hitchens, known as Hitch, with Book Nook Biz. And 1106 took me through the entire process, and I do have one piece of paper I can refer to, and I'll show your readers, but this is what 1106 did. You can see it's just an entire process with steps you have to go through and everything, but you go from the editing to the layout and everything. It was all very important, and I'm glad I used them. And the last thing I did is I used two editors. I used an editor in Knoxville and then one of theirs in Phoenix.
Okay, so the company is 1106?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question I was going to get at, because now we need to focus on the writing aspects of this book, because that is what this podcast is for. It is books in hindsight, and we're all writers. We all have the same, most of us are self-published, and we all have the same problems. So this is a way that people can compare and give our advice and the things that we did wrong, and give our experience to people that haven't done that yet. And also just a way to compare notes. So you chose the self-publishing route, and was there any particular reason for that?
Well, I looked at both, but chose the self-publishing route for two main reasons: control and speed. Mm-hmm. I mean, no telling how long it was going to take to hawk the book out to all these publishing companies, and the other thing was control. You own 100% of the rights, 100% of all the royalties. You decide what you want to do. You have more flexibility. But I subcontracted out in those areas where I felt it was very important, where I needed help. So that was why I decided to self-publish. And, I'm glad that I did it, because there are more options and more venues today than there were in former times. So it's easier to get it out, but it's not easier to publish it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's certainly not easier to market it. So how does New Shelves come into this?
Yeah,
is New Shelves helping you market your book?
Yes, they are. As part of my process, as part of my program, so to speak, I knew that I would need some help getting the word out there. I mean, when you sell a book, initially you're going to have your friends, acquaintances, everybody's going to buy it. Then what do, Matt? I mean, you can have the greatest book in the world, but if no one knows anything about it, you have to get word out there. Yeah. So while all this was going on, I was in the process of interviewing different companies, and I was fortunate to have engaged the services of a company called New Shelves Books up in Rochester, New York. And I've been working with Amy Collins, who is the president and runs the company, and her right-hand woman, Carrie Barnum. So I've been fortunate to work with them. And, they've made it quite clear to me that after that first wave, it's a marathon, not a sprint, because you have to get word out there. Now, how do you get word out there? I mean, up until this point, I was a social media ghost. I wasn't on anything. Yeah. What did Darwin say? It's not the strong that survive, it's those who adapt. Well, to get word out there, you have to be active on social media. So, I was on LinkedIn before, but I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. I'm doing press releases, I'm doing podcasts. I'm willing to do interviews anytime, anywhere. And I think as an author, you have to put yourself out there. Yes. You contacted me yesterday. I said without hesitation, absolutely, yeah. Right on, do it, right? And I think you have to have that attitude. I think some people may not be comfortable with that, but you have to put yourself out there. And anytime I have a chance to promote my book, I do it. So we're just going to keep chipping away. And after a while, there'll be a groundswell of demand for It Starts With You.
Well, I'm surprised. I mean, I have no doubt about that. And I'm sure that if you had gone the traditional publishing route, that, I don't think you would have had any problem, especially based on your background. And then your book looks awesome. I'm seeing it back in the background. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's basically, you've got the maze, but he's got a straight line cutting right through that maze. So it's a really nice concept of the design of the book. So who did the formatting?
1106 Design.
They did all that.
Work with me on the formatting, and on the cover. That is a very important piece of the puzzle, so to speak, or a piece of the project. What we wanted to do is we wanted to have something that showed that with this book, it's going to give you the way to find the path, the answers through the maze, and the gray areas encompass getting your mind right. Okay, so it's representing mindset, okay, and habits to get you through the maze of life so you can find the straight way and find fulfillment and success.
Right. Well, I don't want to give away the details of your book, but just from what you've said about it, I'm certainly interested in it, and I'm sure that anybody listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube is going to be interested in what you've got to say. So let's go. I want to talk a little bit about your experience. Have you had success? When was the book published?
It was published in September, and it's gone very well the first 30 days. Okay, very well, and you saw the reviews on Amazon. They're stellar. I'm flattered, but people need to now know about it. Outside my first wave of influence, so to speak, that's been exhausted. I wouldn't say exhausted, but many of the people have purchased a book, and now I need to get the word out to a wider audience. If I can just simply replicate those reviews on Amazon across a wider geographical, area, that would be a very good thing, and that's what I'm trying to do. But that takes time, it takes persistence, it takes effort, and I'll find a way or make one.
Well, I think you're going to have no problem seeking success with that book. It really is amazing. Just looking at it, I'm certainly curious about it, and I'm just curious about how you apply your life experiences with what you talk about in your book. So, I could sit here and talk to you all day about, well, are we talking about habits? And we talked about that quote, and I've only got a few more minutes with you, but I just want to see if we've really, if we've understood any more about this sentence that says, quote, Stuvek has observed and codified the only brain training that creates quantum leaps of action. So let me see if I learned anything. So you're talking about basically identifying weaknesses and creating habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you talk about your self-image, and does the book focus a lot on a person's self-image and creating a positive one?
It does. I mean, the first thing it hones in on is the belief in yourself and the belief in what you're doing. And then it talks about fit. Okay, you have to have a good fit in what you're doing, because if you believe in if you believe in yourself but don't like what you're doing and are not fit for it, that's not good. Now, what is a bad fit? A bad fit is someone who is an introvert in a position that requires an extroverted personality. Now, can you do something about that? Well, yes, you can. And that's where you establish the goals in chapter 3. And then in chapter 4, you have a strategy. Okay. Then you commit. Okay. And I talk about how you commit and why people don't commit and the reasons they don't commit. Okay. Then I talk about act. Okay. How do you act and how do you learn? And I have specifics in each one. And the sum total of these things all put together, these processes, these steps, they do work. They will be successful, but you have to follow them. And when the word codify is used, it's talking about assembling all these points together, because it's not one thing, it's the convergence of all these things put together that's going to make it work.
Yeah, and so that's basically what your book is. It's codified is a real I like to use the term $10 word, but basically it's your roadmap, right? It's your outline for your success. That's what your book is, and it's about developing proper habits. And I think you're going to be really successful at it. And I wish you all the luck. But before you go, I want to just repeat that the book It Starts With You. And I want to remind you that the website is itstartswithyou.net. It's not .com, it's .net. And the author is Fred Stuvek, and that is Stuvek. Fred was an ensign and a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. Actually, it's Fred Stuvek Jr. And he is now a consultant, a speaker, and an author. And I just have to ask you one more question before you go, because I didn't get to your marketing. And can you tell me what are you doing with New Shelves? Why did you approach New Shelves Books?
I had worked with Amy in former times on a small project as it pertained to branding on my book, and I came to the realization that she got it, that she understood it. But at that point, I didn't know that she did marketing. And so it was just through, I say in the book, movimiento es vida, movement is life. I was talking to people. You talk to people, you get to know people, it creates opportunities. Amy contacted me and said, well, Fred, I'd like to work with you on this. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed Carrie last week, I guess. And, I've published 5 books, and I wish I had talked to those people a long time ago. But they are so full of information, and I don't get anything from them, or I don't work with them. But I was just so fascinated by how much Carrie knew and how much the industry has changed. So, it's really difficult if you're like I guess I'm a maverick. I like to do everything on my own and beat my head against the wall. But it is definitely an option and almost a requirement these days to get help with your publishing and whatever. And Fred, I did all the formatting on my book, and I'm on YouTube, watching these videos and trying to get you got to have your name of your book on the one side of the page and then the chapter on the other. All that stuff took so long, and now I'm podcasting, and Deceptions of the Aging is my web. I've got a YouTube channel, and I just do all kinds of things to promote my books because I like to do it for free. And I could have spent the money and got somebody like New Shelves, and they would have probably helped me a little bit more. So anyway, I don't have anything to do with them other than the fact that I wish I would have contacted them a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Well, Fred, do you have any parting guests, parting words of wisdom for our guests?
Well, I would say 2 things as it pertains to the website. It starts with you.net. There's information about the book, but you can also read the preface and the chapter on adversity on that website. So if someone wants to get a glimpse of the book, they can go in and read it. And my last message would be that wherever you are, if you think that you need to make a change, do it. Because I'm sure it's the same for you, Matt. I mean, there have been times when it seems uncomfortable or you don't want to do it, but hasn't just about in every instance when you've made a change, things worked out. There's been some discomfort at first, but it worked out, didn't it? So you got to make a change because, one of the things I always ask somebody, if your life is the same 5 years from now, would you be happy? And if the answer is no, then buy my book. Okay?
All right. That's a great line. Okay, Fred. Well, I'm going to let you go. It has really been an honor talking to you. You're a very high caliber individual. You do walk the walk. So I hope we'll be in touch in the future. And I think I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to say goodbye to our audience. So just hold on for a second. This is Books in Hindsight. We've been talking to Fred Stuvek, and Fred is at itstartswithyou.net. And his book is It Starts With You. All right, so we'll see you next time on Books in Hindsight, and keep on reading.
This has been Books in Hindsight with your host, Matthew Hines. Please join us for our next podcast and look for our archives on iTunes and go to thehindsight.com. That's HEINES site.com for great books by Matthew Hines and other great authors.